Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Talking Business. We are getting going with another special episode right here today, focusing on transport for West Midlands and their importance to and link with the Birmingham Commonwealth Games coming in 2022. Today, we are chatting to Andrew, who has a real senior role to play in the train, rail, and tram infrastructure in Birmingham and the West Midlands. And we'll be linking that into the Commonwealth Games. We'll be talking at current developments, past developments, and the impact they have been having, and also the legacy and future developments that the Commonwealth Games will bring to Birmingham and the West Midlands area. So here we go. Here's Andrew talking business on Transport for West Midlands and the Birmingham Commonwealth Games.
Hello, everyone. We're talking business and we are talking transport and the Commonwealth Games. This series of videos where we'll be talking to different people involved with the Games coming to Birmingham and the West Midlands in 2022. Today we've got Andrew. So I'll say hello, Andrew. How are you today?
Hello, I'm very well. Thank you, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming along. We really appreciate you giving up some time of your no doubt busy day to chat to us here. So that we can get stuck into this and the students know who they're listening to today and learning from. Who are you, Andrew? And what do you do?
I'm Andrew Leo. My job title is Spectator Transport Manager, Rail, Metro and Interchange at the moment, which is a bit of a mouthful, but basically means that I'm responsible for making sure that rail and the tram provide what they need to during the Commonwealth Games, as Danny's mentioned, in the summer of 2022. The networks are going to be very, very busy, and we've got to make sure that they provide what's needed. The interchange bit is there really to reflect the fact that we need to make sure that where people are using lots of different modes of transport, so you might take a train somewhere, then need to take a bus somewhere else, or you might take a tram somewhere, then you need to walk, or whatever it is. It's there to make sure that it change between those different modes is as smooth as it possibly can be for people. That's broadly what I do at the moment. I've had a bit of a career in the railway industry as well. So rail is probably what I know most about. I've been working in rail for about 13, 14 years, something like that.
Okay. Well, let's focus on that then. So, the Regions Rail Network, you've talked about busy. So what's your definition of busy when the Commonwealth Games get here? Do you projected the number of people to be coming here? And how's that going to tie into the Regions Rail Network now? And if you had to give an overview of the Regions Rail Network, what would you say to somebody who doesn't really catch trains that much, or trams for that matter? How would you describe what it is?
Well, the network itself is centred on Birmingham New Street Station. There's a quite useful diagram. Let me see if I can share that with people, so you can kind of see what it looks like. It's a little bit complicated, but it says host participation.
Do you want me to see if I can change that setting?
Yes, maybe that might be good if possible.
Okay. All participants. There we go. So if I close that, hey, can you do that now?
Let's have a look. Yes, there we go. Right, let's just see if I can put this on the screen.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you see that?
Yeah, we got that.
Excellent. What you can see on the screen is a map of the region's railway. So you can see it's quite complicated. You've got Birmingham New Street Station in the middle here. Birmingham New Street is the busiest station in the country outside London, actually, and it's I think the 5th busiest station in the UK now as well. So it really is a very busy station, or at least was prior to March time last year in the coronavirus pandemic, which has seen passenger numbers really fall as people have been told to stay at home. But you can see that there are a number of different legs coming out from Birmingham New Street. These orange lines here are the West Midlands Railway local services. and you can see the cross city line there coming down to Redditch, going all the way up through Birmingham New Street up towards Sutton Coldfield and Lichfield. You've got the lines out to Coventry and Wolverhampton here. Some of these different colours represent different train operators. You know, people may be aware that when you see trains, they have lots of different colours on them. You know, you've got some which are orange and purple, some which are green, some which are maybe silver with a bit of maroon, some which are perhaps a little bit blue as well. And that just means that they are run by different companies, and you can see that on the map here. So the purple sort of lines here are cross-country services, and the dark green lines here are Avanti services that run from Scotland all the way through Birmingham and then on down to Coventry and London from there. The only other thing to actually say on this is that Birmingham's a bit unusual in the sense that although most services go through this one central station at Birmingham New Street, we've got another line as well, which is the Snow Hill lines, and these deal with services out towards the Kidderminster, Stourbridge Junction, Black Country part of the region, in through Smethwick and down through. They don't actually go into Birmingham New Street, they go to two separate stations in the city centre, Birmingham Snow Hill and Birmingham Moor Street, and then they go on down to Solihull, Leamington, Stratford at the other end. And actually this blue line here represents Chiltern Railway Services, who operate trains down to London as well. So Birmingham is in actually, I think, a pretty unique position for the country, in that there are 3 different train operators that you can get between Birmingham and London. So you have a choice. If you want the fastest trains that are most frequent, you'll probably go with Avanti. If you want the cheapest services, you'll probably go with West Midlands trains. And you've also got the Chiltern Railways option as well. So we've got a quite complex and extensive network in the region. But as you hinted, Danny, it is very busy as well, or as I say, certainly was prior to March time last year.
So I mean, how, you know, looking at that there, and you know, you were talking earlier about interchanges and the fact that you can get to a station, and then what do you do? Then how do you travel from there? You know, I spoke to Jackie, we were talking about e-scooter trials, cycle share schemes, metro, improving walking conditions. So how important is this kind of rail network to the upcoming Commonwealth Games? And is it at the point that the games might not even be able to happen, or you certainly for spectators, they wouldn't get there without this rail network? How crucial is this network to a successful games running?
It's absolutely vital for 2 groups of passengers, really. Firstly, for people coming into the region, you know, people who are going to be travelling from London, Leeds, Manchester, Bristol, you know, Reading, Oxford, all over the country to come into the West Midlands region to see the games. They will largely be travelling by train to do so, and if the rail network weren't there, they either wouldn't be able to travel, or they would have to drive into the region, and that would put a huge amount of strain on the region's road network without the railways there to do it. And the other type of traveller that we'll have is those travelling around the region to the venues themselves as well. And some people will have to probably do both of those types of journeys. So they'll have to come into the region on the train, probably to Birmingham New Street, but maybe to one of the other central Birmingham stations. And then they'll have to take another train, or they'll have to take a bus, or they'll have to take a tram out to the venue. So rail is going to be really important in providing that capacity on the transport network. One of the big advantages of rail travel compared to some other modes of transport is that rail is really good at transporting large volumes of people all going in the same direction and then coming back again. It has a huge capacity to do that. You know, trains in this region can be up to 11 coaches long. Some of the Avanti Pendolino services are that length. They can maybe accommodate up to 1,000 people at a time, and that's not the sort of capacity that you can easily provide using the road network, or even using the bus network. Actually, the amount of bus, a typical bus would say can take up to 70 people. So just imagine the number of buses that you need in order to transport the same amount of people that you can transport just with one train.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely vital to the success of the Commonwealth Games that rail is there to provide that capacity. And just on that interchange point as well, look at this map here, you can see, let's pick out a couple of examples. One is the Sandwell Aquatic Centre, which is being built. I mean, this map obviously isn't to scale, but it's being kind of built somewhere here, more or less. So it's not really that convenient for any particular station. The station isn't next door to it. It's not right alongside it.
And that's in is that officially Smethwick, I think, is the official address of it. It's Smethwick, Cape Hill, past Bearwood, down that area, because that's kind of my side of town. So it's really exciting for me as like a local citizen to think, wow, I'll have that within 10-15 minute cycle or a 5-minute drive or whatever. That we're talking Smethwick area there for the aquatic centre, right?
We are. Yes. And I mean, it's about, I don't know, 20-25 minutes walk from Smethwick Rolfe Street to Smethwick Galton Bridge stations. So, I mean, it's not too far away, but it's kind of, far enough. It's not as if you just get off the train and it's right next door. So for that particular venue, rail will play a role in getting people from Birmingham city centre here out as far as, we're probably actually going to be using the Hawthorns as a shuttle bus hub for the Sandwell Aquatic Centre, because you've also got the metro. This is this thin blue line that you see here. So you can either get the metro or you can get a train on the Stowe Hill lines out to the Hawthorns, and then you will need to get a bus from the Hawthorns down here to the aquatic centre.
So that makes it really feasible then, doesn't it, to come from Wolverhampton or the city centre of Birmingham or all those places kind of in between, to think you can jump on a metro, jump on a bus, and then you'll be there.
Yes, exactly. And the other way that you might be able to do this is that because it's only that sort of 25-minute walk from Smethwick Galton Bridge station, Smethwick Galton Bridge is quite an interesting station, actually, because it's on 2 levels. You've got the low-level bit, which is these lines out here from New Street, between New Street and Wolverhampton, and you've got some trains which stop there that come from places far outside the region as well. So you've got trains coming in from Aberystwyth, West Wales, even trains from Liverpool and Crewe will stop at the Smethwick Galton Bridge. So if you're travelling from those sort of places, it's likely that that's going to be the best option for you. You can get the train straight into Smethwick Galton Bridge, and then you're a 25-minute walk from the venue that you're going to see the swimming or the diving at. So you could see there how sort of rail provides a big part of that particular sort of travel plan for that particular venue, but it's not the only bit of it. You need the other bits of transport to work in tandem with that. Either through having a good quality walking route between Smethwick Galton Bridge and the aquatic centre, or through having a well-managed integrated shuttle bus operation at the Hawthorns, so that it really is kind of seamless for you. You can, as you say, get off the tram, get off the train at the Hawthorns, bus is there waiting for you, it takes you straight into the aquatic centre, and it's the same in reverse when you finish the event, either early afternoon for the first session or later in the evening for the second session. You get straight on the bus at the aquatic centre, takes you all the way to the Hawthorns, and then you can get straight from there onto a bus, train or tram, and that will take you to where you need to go.
And the multimodal, the interchange is really interesting there, because the train line I catch to work would go through Smethwick Galton Bridge, so and I know that very well, and also cycling underneath it. So you've got those beautiful canals that have recently been, in the last couple of years, being kind of resurfaced, that are now much more feasible for cycling, running, walking, leisure, commuting, all kinds of things. So to see all that kind of start to link up and see a real kind of purpose to that is it's really quite interesting. The thought process that's gone into this, and the long-term planning as well. These are we talk with our students about the difference between tactical and strategic plans, and this is massively strategic in terms of how you want people to move around the region for the next 20-30 years, I would presume. So, I mean, we spoke, well, we chatted on the email briefly about some of the challenges associated with this. I mean, the word complicated, I don't think comes anywhere close to explaining it, really.
Yeah, yeah.
For us who just go, well, I'll just get on the train and it arrives in Birmingham. That's all that happens. And you were talking about, you said here, you were talking about the different train companies there. So, I mean, how many organisations are you working with? We talk about trains, and we see this train turn up, and we get on, and then we sit there, we get off, and everything's fine. But what's had to happen to get to that point? How many organisations are we talking about here, Andrew?
A good number. I mean, I think it's fair to say, without being too kind of overtly political about this, that if you were starting from scratch and thinking about, right, what sort of structure would we have in place for the railways in the area? How many organisations would we have to make it kind of work properly in order to provide something good for the games and kind of beyond that as well? I think it's unlikely that you would get to the answer that we have at the moment. You might say, well, actually, it would be useful to have just one organisation that you have to deal with that owns the trains, owns the tracks, operates all that as well, so that any particular thing that you want to do, you could just go to that one organisation and they can sort it out for you. Now, for whatever reasons of kind of politics and history, that's not kind of where we are at the moment.
Yeah.
And
that's certainly another story for another day, isn't it? It's a much longer one.
Yes. Well, indeed, yes. But we have an organisation called Network Rail, which looks after, owns, and manages all the railway infrastructure. So, what by that I mean things like the tracks themselves, the overhead wires that you see on some of the routes, which give the electricity that the trains need to run. We're talking bridges, tunnels, embankments, all that sort of stuff. It's owned, managed, and operated by this one organisation, Network Rail. However, as we've briefly mentioned already, the trains themselves are not run by Network Rail. They're run by not just one, but lots of different operators, depending on kind of the services that they're running. You can see on the map, you've got those kind of thicker orange lines, which are operated by West Midlands Trains. They use the brand actually West Midlands Railway, so you'll see the trains going around in their purple and orange kind of colours. They're West Midlands Railway. They're generally kind of more local services in the region. You've then got another brand of West Midlands trains called London North Western Railway, which operates some of the longer distance services. So that's this kind of lighter green line here. They go up towards Liverpool. They go down towards Northampton, Milton Keynes, and London as well. They provide the locals kind of cheaper services along that particular route. Then you've got Avanti West Coast, who operate along this darker green line. They provide kind of longer distance intercity services. You've got cross country, you've got Chiltern Railways, and you've also got Transport for Wales as well, who are the train operator that run from Birmingham International out through Birmingham, New Street, Wolverhampton towards, Aberystwyth, West Wales, up to North Wales as well, Holyhead. So you've got those train operators which form a large bit of the picture as well. But you can kind of see on this map that's still on the screen that, if you're looking at the service between Birmingham, New Street and Coventry, for example, you've got a number of different coloured lines there. So, you can't just go and talk to one of the train operators about that. You need to have all of them in the room, and you also need to have Network Rail in the room in order to make some of this work. And that's just a couple of other organisations to throw in here, which you need to kind of make sure you're engaging with as well. You've got the British Transport Police, who are responsible for policing the rail network. And you've also got the Department for Transport as well, who are the central government body that look after the contracting process. That's maybe another topic for another day as well, because that's kind of quite complicated, and it's changed quite a bit over the last few years as well. So, but they need to be a critical part of what we're doing as part of this too. And I mean, the other final complexity to throw in there is that, just coming back to Network Rail for a moment, although Network Rail is one organisation that has one chief executive at the top of it, because of the sort of vast variety of different things that Network Rail has to do. There are often lots of different people that you have to talk to in Network Rail in order to find the right person for what you want to do. It's very seldom the case that you talk to the one person in Network Rail and they can cover everything that the organisation does. So part of the challenge of planning for the games, but also kind of operating the network on a more normal basis as well, is how all those various different organisations kind of work together just to make the railway network function, and that's without kind of throwing in some of the other transport modes in there as well.
Wow, that's intense. You know, I mean, we talk about stakeholders and stakeholder conflict and things like that. I mean, the number of stakeholders that you must have to kind of please or appease, depending on which way you want to look at it, or just satisfy. You know, how do you go about prioritizing different types of stakeholders? Because we look at it in theory in terms of, well, you know, the government's going to have a say, the local community, the pressure groups like environmentalists, the actual rail customers, the employees like yourself, and train drivers and mechanics and things. I mean, how do you, that's not, I haven't even mentioned the train companies and the local businesses. So, I mean, how do you go about prioritizing those? Are you listening to all these different voices all the time and trying to match it all up?
Yes, so just looking at this from sort of just the rail industry point of view at the moment, we can broaden it out in a moment, because that's kind of complicated enough. I suppose the first point is that you don't go into a conversation that has only just started. And what I mean by that is that there are already kind of relationships there between Network Rail, sometimes the various different bits of Network Rail, those different train operators, British Transport Police as well. So as Transport for West Midlands, which is the organisation that I work for at the moment, we're trying to kind of draw all those people together. Right. But these aren't people that don't have a relationship at all. We're not kind of bringing them together for the first time. These are people that and organisations that work together pretty much kind of every day of the year, and you know have done so for the last 20 or 30 years in various kind of different forms. So you're not coming into a blank canvas, as it were, and that means there are all sorts of tensions and strains and perhaps other things in that relationship that you need to be aware of and that you need to kind of work through. And some of it is, you know, being aware of what those are, and then you have to sort of look at which of those things really do need to be prioritized in terms of, you know, what are the big blockers to what you're trying to do. And if you've got, you know, two of your organizations trying to kind of butt up against each other because they don't agree, what are the big things that are not going to happen because that's the case. Now, again, just briefly coming back to the point about how the rail industry is structured, the original plan when the railway network was privatized in the mid-1990s was to create a structure that was actually quite adversarial and quite driven by conflict in many ways, because it was felt that that was the way to get things working better. You know, if you had an infrastructure owner, in those days it was Railtrack, which became Network Rail, but if you had an infrastructure owner that was kind of responsible to the train operators, the train operators could then put lots of pressure on the infrastructure provider to do things properly, and if it didn't do things properly, then they could, you know, kick off and make a fuss about it, and that would make Railtrack pull its socks up and you know, improve and get better. You know, likewise between train operators, you know, mentioned the fact that between Birmingham and London, we've got 3 different operators that provide different levels of service. The idea was that those operators compete against each other, and you know, the one that provides the best kind of compromise on price, value, journey time, comfort, all that sort of thing, that's the one that kind of gets the most business. And you know, through those sort of creative tensions, you might call it, the whole kind of system gets better. But we can debate about whether that worked out in practice or not.
That's right, because at the end of the day, the key focus is, will customers pay for this service and will they use it? Surely, you know, that's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and actually, I mean, I think the industry is in a slightly different place now, and the watchwords are now much more about working together, collaboration, all that sort of stuff. In fact, as the organisation that I'm kind of seconded to Transport for West Midlands at the moment, but my substantive position is within an organisation called West Midlands Rail Executive, who provide a little bit of kind of the contract management stuff that DST would usually do, but for the West Midlands region. One of the things that West Midlands Rail Executive has recently pulled together is something called the Grand Rail Collaboration, which is an organisation that brings together all the train operators and Network Rail and anyone else that is involved in the running of this thing, on the basis that actually if the rail industry works together, it gets a better outcome than if it's kind of, if different organizations are constantly at each other's throats and, trying to get one over on each other. And increasingly these days, that's kind of, I think, the direction things are going in. To take the Birmingham to Coventry example again, the train operators that operate between those two stations probably each provide a slightly different service. If people want the quicker service, then you've got the Avanti service there, that you've got the West Midlands Railway service and serving some of the local stations. So I would just come back to the question about kind of how you prioritize some of that. It's largely about what's the problem that you're trying to solve, which are the organisations that are best placed to do that, and how do you make sure that some of those other organisations are also brought into that conversation as well, and that you're bringing the right people around the table to discuss things in the right way and to get the best outcome for passengers and those that need to travel, which is ultimately what we're here to do.
Yeah, and you talked about solving a problem there. What's the problem and how do we solve it? Which kind of leads into some of the last questions we've got train related in terms of, so what's next in terms of this train network? Sustainability is a buzzword and a keyword, and it's bandied about everywhere. And obviously the train network plays a key part in keeping Birmingham and West Midlands going. There's a lot of statistics saying how many people are going to come to Birmingham and live and work in Birmingham in the next 10 to 15 years. So, this problem of increased people on the roads, increased people moving, working, travelling, maybe COVID has changed that, certainly has in the short term, and maybe it will do in the long term as well. But in terms of sustainability, where do you fit in with that as some of the things that, we all really need to be aware of over the next, the rest of our lifetimes?
Yes, I mean, I think as I was thinking about this particular discussion, one of the things that I went back to was one of the a part of the course that I did at university was called Cities as Traffic Machines, a kind of history of urban transport, and that kind of took us through how some of this planning stuff has developed, particularly over the course of kind of the 20th century, maybe a little bit kind of before that as well. One of the interesting things about that, sort of kind of focusing on kind of where things were in the 1950s and 1960s in particular, was that there was an emerging discussion about the role of motor vehicles in cities. And this was at a time when I don't think it was necessarily completely obvious that actually the railways had any future at all. They were yesterday's technology. They were, you still in the 1950s and actually early 1960s as well had steam trains running along the network. And that compared to these motor vehicles, which were kind of the new thing. They offered kind of you the opportunity to basically get in something that was kind of covered, sheltered, warm, and it would take you to exactly where you wanted to go. No more kind of trudging to the station in the rain, waiting for a delayed train, getting your clothes dirty with all the soot and goodness knows what else was on the railway network at that particular moment in time. So there was a lot there which said that actually perhaps the railway will just kind of fade out as a method of transport. People won't need to use it anymore. Now, obviously that hasn't quite kind of worked out.
So it's a bit
practice.
different, yeah.
Yes, but one of the things that actually, let's just take this off the screen for
Sure,
one moment, because I've got one of the things that seems to have been going around a lot at that point was, what do we want our cities to be like? Because we can design them for people to use motor cars as much as possible. We can do that. However, there are lots of different compromises that you have to make if that's what you want to do. You need to, in particular, provide the space for cars, which means things like large multi-storey car parks. It means things like large kind of urban inner city motorways and dual carriageways. It means granting cars access to quite a lot of your kind of city centre. And in order to do that, you probably need to get rid of quite a lot of the city centre that's already there. Yeah. And so the question became, to what extent do you want to sort of destroy some of the fabric of your city so that you can drive in there as much as you like? And even then there was perhaps a realization that even if you did all that, you probably still wouldn't be able to provide for the amount of use that people wanted to use their cars for. So there was a famous report called Traffic in Towns that a town planner called Colin Buchanan wrote, which was, I think, one of the very few government sort of policy publications that actually ended up being published by I think it was Penguin. So it actually got published by a book company, which is kind of, again, quite rare for technical.
That's very mainstream, isn't it? That's as mainstream as it gets, really. And you talk about Penguin publishers.
Yeah, absolutely. And he said that that the measures required to deal with the full potential amount of motor traffic in big cities are so formidable that society will have to ask itself seriously how far it is prepared to go with the motor vehicle. And he also said, we are nourishing at immense cost a monster of great potential destructiveness, and yet we love him dearly. And that was kind of referring to the car. So I think we found over the last kind of few years that we don't really want our cities to have big urban dual carriageways going through them. That's doesn't make things particularly pleasant. There are environmental costs to that as well, and therefore, I think that the future for rail is really important. The amount of people that we need to get into and out of our city centres means that you need a method of transport that is good at doing that sort of that sort of thing. To be honest, motor vehicles might be good for lots of things, but they're not particularly good at getting large volumes of people from one place to another in an efficient way, because think about the amount of space that a motor car takes up, and typically you've only perhaps got one person in that during the peak periods.
Exactly, and certainly at peak times as well. We all go to work at the same time. We finish work at the same time, and for the Commonwealth Games, events will start and finish at the same time, and you'll need 10,000 people in a particular area at a particular time, and cars it just doesn't work.
No, and there's a really good illustration of this, which I think was done by Canberra, I think, in Australia. Let me just see if I can put this up on the screen and see if this works. I don't know if you've seen this before. What they've tried to do here is illustrate. I think they've got about sort of 70 people-ish there, and they've tried to illustrate the amount of space that you need if all those 70 people are traveling by car, which is on the right-hand side here, if all those 70 people are traveling by bicycle, and if all those 70 people are traveling on a bus. And you can I think that's quite a good way of illustrating the amount of space that you need if everyone started traveling by car. And as you say, for the Commonwealth Games, it just isn't something that we would be able to kind of manage, really. The numbers of people that we're looking to transport around the region, and let me just get the right statistics here. We're looking at 1.7 million ticketed spectators across the games. If all of those people decided they wanted to drive to every single event and then drive around the region afterwards, we would be at gridlock very, very quickly. So, from the point of view of actually getting people efficiently around and to and from the region, not only during the games, but also sort of outside the games under normal circumstances as well. The rail and tram networks are absolutely vital in order to support that. Quite apart from the fact that kind of environmentally, the emissions that you get per passenger from rail and a tram are much lower, certainly than a car with only one person in it.
And it's for noise and visual pollution as well. The concept art I've seen for the Sandwell Aquatic Centre, because that's so close to me, I'm really interested in that one. But the artwork for that and the green surroundings, and it's a beautiful looking building, and to know where it's going, and then think, okay, so now let's put a 3,000 or 4,000 capacity car park next to it, multi-story, get rid of all that grass, and you think, well, that's not really going to help the area, is it? So there's a lot that goes into this idea that, oh well, it's just a train, but the benefits that brings are really, really deep, and it's really interesting to hear yourself talk about that, who really knows what's going on with it. So and Jackie and I, your colleague Jackie, so we spoke about the legacy of the games as well. Because a lot of people think, or the brief conversations I have is that, what, all this just for the games? It's only a couple of weeks. You go, yes, the games are only a couple of weeks, but what will this leave for the Birmingham and West Midlands area in terms of what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, there are obvious kind of sports legacies for the games, not least the Sandwell Aquatic Centre, which will be there long after the games have finished, and provide kind of that benefit to the community long into the future as well. I think from the rail and tram perspective in particular, one of the things that I've been talking about quite a lot with people is the fact that in March last year, we were all told not to use trains. For the first time, certainly in my lifetime, but for the first time in the lifetime of lots of other people who have been working for rail a lot longer than I have. And this was something that was really kind of went against the grain. Really, they'd spent most of their careers saying to people, use trains. It's the best way of traveling. It's the most efficient way of getting from where you are to where you want to be.
And they were literally switched off overnight, and you're trying to change that conditioning of, but this is what I do. So
yes. And actually, there's a sense in which that message was kind of very, very successful, coupled with all the various government restrictions that went around with it, because rail use dropped by about something like 90%, just in kind of in one fell swoop. Now, the challenge becomes trying to get people back onto trains as restrictions are hopefully lifted over kind of the coming months, and as we get back to something that looks a little bit more like normal, hopefully kind of by the summer, based on the Prime Minister's latest timescales. One of the challenges is that, as I say, we've spent the last 12 months telling people don't use the train and telling them what a health hazard they are, because look what you might catch if you're in close proximity to all these other people. Now, for all the reasons that we've just discussed, I think it's really important that people do start kind of taking the train again. There were lots of studies that various bodies did during the pandemic, which showed that actually traveling on public transport didn't actually present that much of a risk, at least in terms of kind of coronavirus. But I think it's going to be a challenge getting that message out to people again, who are not unreasonably going to be a little bit nervous about being in that sort of close proximity with so many people again. So one of the things that I think the games will play a legacy role in for the region is actually encouraging people to use public transport and to use rail and tram in particular again as they're traveling to venues. I think it will be, or I hope it will be part of people getting used to doing that again after having that this period of time for 12 months plus where they've been told not to do so. as we've said, it's not going to be possible. There just isn't the amount of road space. There isn't the amount of parking available for everyone who wants to travel to the games. Those 1.7 million spectators, they can't all drive there. Not going to be possible. So that people will have to, if they want to go to the games, they will have to start using public transport again. And I think if we, as the rail industry and with tram as well, if we can provide a really good service to people, if we don't drop the ball and have the disruption that could sometimes happen on rail and kind of thousands of people waiting hours for trains to get them back to where they need to go. If we can avoid some of that, we can, I hope, kind of gently show people again that actually, rail is a good way of getting around. So, I mean, my hope is that that's going to be one of the benefits that we can bring to the region through the work that we're doing. And in more kind of concrete terms, you've got a couple of big station redevelopment projects that are taking place, one at University Station, the other at Perry Bar Station, which at least for Perry Bar is very much focused on providing a transport hub for the Alexander Stadium, which is a sort of 15-20 minute walk away. And the university will also provide a really important gateway to the hockey and one other event that I forget that's happening at university. Yeah, I mean, those are kind of two kind of very visible things that I think will be a legacy of the games in the area. Those kind of two new stations, which will help the region for
exactly. Yeah, it'll open up commuting and leisure and all kinds of opportunities and possibilities. And I mean, where our college is situated, we're in Borsall Heath, and we've heard a few times now of the King's Heath, the Moseley. Yeah, you already know what I'm going to ask. The Moseley, the King's Heath line, which a lot of our students didn't know existed. We've tried to put it on maps, and it's just something that hasn't really been in our time frame. So the idea of jumping on trains, Moseley, King's Heath, Birmingham, it's really quite bizarre. So whatever you're allowed to tell me, I don't know. So what's the plan with Moseley, King's Heath and the Birmingham line? Is that something that's still in the works?
Yes, very much so. And I think, I should know this, I'm sure there was some sort of funding announcement that the mayor put out about this fairly recently. There was kind of, I think it was £63 million or something like that had been granted from the government to help support the development of those stations. Again, I'm going to try and share my my screen again. There's a very useful website called Rail Map Online, which shows. It's got the Google Maps sort of background, but it also has a couple of layers that you can put on it. One of which is the historic railway line, so that's kind of quite interesting if you like that sort of thing. You can have a look in your area and see where railway lines used to run, and that map is very kind of dense. There's lots of stuff on there. Lots of it kind of disappeared in the 1950s and 60s. But one of the other things that it can do is show you where railway lines go at the moment, and if I can make this work, you should be able to see that you see where that kind of line goes, kind of overlaid on Google Maps. So here we are. We've got Borsall Heath is here. This line over here is the Cross City line. So you've got that's Bourneville Station there. You've got Selly Oak Station there, University, Five Ways, and then Birmingham New Street.
So we are just to the right of Birmingham Central Mosque on there at the next roundabout. The roundabout we've that's the one.
Highgate
just up there, just on that roundabout right there. That's it. There we go. That's it, exactly there where your cursor was there. Yeah. So it goes across a bridge, which is just down the road that you can see from our classrooms. So it is. I mean, walking distance is an understatement in terms of where the line goes.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and this line at the moment, if you just zoom out a little bit again, it's a line that's used. It is used by passenger trains, but it's usually longer distance services that use this line so that they. I mean, this kind of gaggle of lines here is Birmingham New Street, and you've got trains that come in from this direction from New Street that need to go to the West Country, and under normal circumstances they would then have to reverse and go back out this way. But what they can do is they can come straight through the station, come out here, go around this little bit of corner here, and then come down this line and then go on through Kings Norton and then down towards Cheltenham, Bristol, Plymouth, Penzance, etc. So that happens on a kind of fairly regular basis. And then occasionally this line is also used if there are kind of problems at university, say, you can divert some other trains around here and get them back into Birmingham New Street via a different route. So it's a line that's used kind of fairly frequently, and I mean, you may kind of see on occasion some trains going over that bridge that's not too far from you. The plan is that there will be at least 3 new stations. I think Allsall Heath, there's been talk of that. I'm not sure that's yet confirmed, but certainly at Moseley, Kings Heath, and down here at Hazelwell, there will be there's planned to be stations. It's been quite difficult. I mean, this goes back to the point of the West Midlands rail network being quite congested. It's not always easy to say, right, well, we'll have 3 or 4 extra trains and that won't be a problem. When you start to look in more detail at Birmingham New Street Station, Birmingham New Street has, I think it's something like a train arriving every 37 seconds throughout the day, and it's pretty much kind of near capacity in terms of the numbers of trains going through it. And there's also a general kind of principle within the rail industry that the more trains you try and squeeze into the network, the more unreliable the whole thing becomes, because as soon as you have one particular incident, that then that ricochets throughout the whole of the network. Exactly, yes. So the more trains you try and squeeze in, the less reliable the whole system becomes. So there's been a bit of a challenge in trying to work through where you can actually put some of these extra services. But I think what we're broadly looking at the moment is that those 3 stations will be served by 2 trains an hour that, to start off with, will come up from kind of the Kings Norton area and then come around the corner here and into Birmingham New Street. Now, I think there's still a bit of discussion about exactly what happens at the southwestern bit of this. So do they terminate at Kings Norton? Do they go further south? Do they do something else? But one of the things that, if we just zoom in on this area here, actually, which is not too far from where you are, the ideal would be, because 2 trains an hour doesn't sound like that much, and to be honest, it's not as many trains an hour as we would like to put through through that line. One of the big challenges that we've got is that point about Birmingham New Street being very, very busy, and if you want to put extra services into there, then you've got to think about which other ones you're taking out, basically, and that's not a particular conversation I think a lot of people want to have. But what is being planned in the long term is that you've got, do you remember towards the start of the conversation we talked about the kind of the 2 sort of separate bits of the railway network in central Birmingham, most of it focused on Birmingham New Street,
your Snow Hill and your Moor Street.
Here you've got the lines coming in from Tyseley into Birmingham Moor Street Station, which is here. Then you've got Birmingham Stowe Hill Station up here. The long-term plan is that Birmingham Moor Street Station will be given some extra capacity, and there'll be a couple of extra platforms that go in there. And then what will happen here, and this is a bit of work that's called the Bordersley cords, you'll have another bit of railway constructed from here round the corner, just like this kind of line here, onto the Stowe Hill lines, so that instead of having to go all the way up here and round the corner into New Street, trains could just take a left turn here, go onto the Snow Hill lines, and then come into Birmingham Moor Street Station instead. And as and when that bit of railway gets built, and I think it's going through the kind of the funding process at the moment, you'll then have the option to put your trains from this line into Moor Street Station instead, and that's the point at which you can start thinking about increasing the numbers of trains, because you've removed the restraint on, or the constraint on capacity up here at Birmingham New Street.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. One, for our studies, but two, a lot of our students are from that area. You know, they live in Small Heath, Allen Rock, Sparkbrook, Derry End, and all that. You know, but they're very much in that area. So as well as our studies, but you know, also when they're commuting and going out for leisure in the next 10 years or so, you know, that could become quite easily part of their daily lives. So it's really interesting to hear that. Okay, well, this is the plan. And then by the time you finish university or you get to work, you might be commuting down to King's Heath. You might be commuting over to Wolverhampton via all these new kind of systems that are being put in. So I find that really fascinating. And in terms of trains and things, I mean, thank you so much for talking to us about the Commonwealth Games and the trains and the links to that. I'm going to ask you one more question, if that's all right, about kind of careers and for our students. So there's a lot of volunteer opportunities at the Commonwealth Games. I think 10,000 is a number that's on the website. When you're looking for staff, what are the kind of things you would look for in a new member of staff? And secondly, how important would it be for students to get involved in terms of being a volunteer? Because obviously volunteer, and some people go, that means I don't get paid. But why would you do that? Why is that important for them? If you don't mind me finishing with that question, careers kind of focused.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and I suppose the first thing to say is that you might not get paid in monetary terms for what you do in a volunteer sense, but you very much do get stuff back for yourself for it, not least the experience of doing that work, you know, the experience of working in a kind of busy transport hub, giving customer service to people, and that's exactly the sort of thing that a lot of organizations that I've worked for would actually look for in kind of in people. So you know, obviously it's really important to have kind of good educational qualifications as well, but that's only one part of the equation. Generally, when people are looking for new members of staff, having some extra experience alongside that, which doesn't have to be paid, it can be voluntary as well, is something that that actually looks pretty good. And these days, a lot, when you go for an interview, a typical interview will have, you know, a number of different questions, but a lot of those questions will be in the format of, give me an example of a time when you have done whatever it is. And that's where some of this experience can really stand you in good stead, because you know, if you're trying to answer a question like, give me an example of a time when you've given good customer service, or give me an example of a time when you've dealt with a difficult situation or something like that. This is the sort of experience that can be really important as part of that kind of interview process. Yeah, I'd really encourage people to get involved. You know, be open-minded about kind of what you might experience, be open to kind of learning new things, and yeah, I think if you've got an open mind, you're willing to learn, and you're willing to apply yourself, there's lots of opportunity out there in the railway industry, and as I hope, if the railway industry continues to be a big part of the region and the country's future, it's going to continue to need people to kind of keep it going, and there is a huge amount of you know, variety of different things that you can do in the railway industry, you know, right through from some of those kind of frontline customer service jobs to driving trains, engineers, transport planners, you know, frontline maintenance stuff, train planning, which is a little bit more kind of technical, and you know, lots of, you know, the endless possibilities. So Lots of opportunity there, which I'd encourage people to go for.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. And it's really interesting to hear you say willing to learn and an open mind. We did a little careers session yesterday, and we had a next step section, and one of those that I put on myself was the last one was keep an open mind, because the route that people take into careers that they end up doing, maybe till they retire, isn't always where they started. There's lots of twists and turns to it, that open mind to just learn different things. It's great to hear somebody like yourself say that. So thank you. Really appreciate your time today. What I'll do in a second is I'll stop recording. We'll stay on and have a quick chat. But no, that is really, really great. We appreciate it. And there's a level of detail there that is just fascinating and really useful for us all. And I will wish you all the best for the Commonwealth Games and the train around. Yeah, thank you very much. All right, cheerio.
Thanks, Andy. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andrew, for taking the time to chat to us here. What an amazing insight into how important the train, rail and tram infrastructure is to Birmingham and the West Midlands in general, but also to make sure that the Birmingham Commonwealth Games can actually happen and spectators can get around and the people involved in the games can get around as well. Really appreciate it, Andrew, for your time today. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for watching this one. I hope it's been useful to you. And I hope that it's also helped you kind of not take it so much for granted what we have here in Birmingham and the West Midlands. You can like, share, subscribe and do all those good things, and I thank you very much if you do, and we'll see you again on another episode of Talking Business. Bye bye.